am a huge proponent of multi-generational housing.
Oh, yeah.
If you want your kids to help you, it shouldn't be a burden to them. My own
Right.
mom and dad bought a house half a mile from me, and that's what allowed us to keep my mom home for 10 years after her dementia diagnosis, because we were
That's
able
amazing.
to support my dad and provide that care. And
Hmm.
it's even easier if you can live within the same house,
Yeah.
because that even decreases that burden of having to go somewhere else to help with that day-to-day care that people frequently need as they age.
Welcome to the Answers for Elders radio show.
And welcome everyone to Answers for Elders Radio Network, heard across the USA on your favorite podcast channel, on YouTube. Anybody that owns a home that has senior parents is looking at that big question: do my parents move in with me, quote unquote? There has been, since COVID, a 40% increase in multi-generational housing. Now, that blows me away. In other words, the family home has another generation living there, whether it's a senior parent or the younger people that can't afford to live on their own. They move back home again. It affects the value of your home. It affects your own estate and your own assets, obviously. And if you're moving in a senior parent, obviously there's going to be some modifications that likely would have to happen in the home, which would again involve an investment, etc. So, Andrea, welcome to the show. This is an important topic that we address, and welcome back to Answers for Elders.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. It's always a pleasure to be here and chat with you about these important topics. I hope that our conversations and our knowledge can be blast out there to the general population who might be
Mhm.
considering selling their house, moving in with a child, blending families, or
Mhm.
creating some type of a plan where
Sure.
kids can take care of parents, parents can take care of kids, and hopefully we all live together happily.
Right, right. I want to talk first to that parent.
Mhm.
It's thinking, well, should I sell my house? Should I invest money in my son or daughter's home? Should I move in with them? What does that mean for my overall estate plan, my assets? How does it affect the other heirs if I have other children? So Andrea, what are the main things someone should think about if they're planning on doing that?
Well, first, I want to say I'm a huge proponent of multi-generational housing.
Oh, yeah.
I think it is such a blessing frequently to everyone in families that get along to kind of share a little bit of a living space. And
Hmm.
that's because from a practical standpoint and through my own experience of, my mom having dementia and us caring for her, that as your parents age, if you feel that you want to help support them in that aging process, especially if they face decline, if they become
Yeah.
ill, then it's such a burden when your families are far away. And I always tell a parent or my clients and my own parents, it's a blessing that you're giving your child to relocate so that you are near to them. So
Yes.
that, now in some instances, maybe a multi-generational house itself is not the best option or it's not feasible, but at minimum, you need to live within a mile of your kids. If you want your kids to help you, it shouldn't be a burden to them. My own
Right.
mom and dad bought a house half a mile from me, and that's what allowed us to keep my mom home for 10 years after her dementia diagnosis, because we were
That's
able
amazing.
to support my dad and provide that care. And
Hmm.
it's even easier if you can live within the same house,
Yeah.
because that even decreases that burden of having to go somewhere else to help with that day-to-day care that people frequently need as they age.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And Andrea, what you're saying is so true, because how many families that I speak to say, well, mom, she doesn't want to leave Southern California. She wants to stay in Southern California. And I know I'm up here in Washington, and I try to do what I can, but it's very difficult because you're in a situation of trying to provide, but you doing it from a distance is very difficult.
Well, it's actually nearly impossible to do it from a distance. And especially as people decline more and more.
Mhm.
And even, as I was part of that sandwich generation where I had young children at home and I had a mom and dad who needed help.
Mhm.
And I'm an attorney and I work full time. And it was overwhelming at times for me to try and balance my kids, their sports, their
Mhm.
school, dinner, homework, work, and also care for my parents. And
Mhm.
so, for any parent who's out there moving near your child so that they don't have to drive 30 minutes, that's an hour out of your day. That's
Yeah,
valuable time. That really causes a lot of stress for your children. Now, that being
sure.
said, one of the challenges I have found as an elder law attorney with multi-generational housing is combining two households. So if any
Huge.
Huge. That's so hard to do. It can actually increase stress a lot because as the parent, you're dealing with, as the child, if you're the parent, you need to remember your child is your child, but they might also be a spouse. They're
Mhm.
also a parent. They might want to care for you, but they have a lot of other obligations that they are likely carrying.
Mhm.
So if you want to live together, the goal is that it's beneficial for everyone
Yeah.
and not just you as a parent. So I
Mhm.
think as an elder, if you are contemplating living with a child, the first thing I would recommend they do is take a step back and say, I want to make sure I'm not overly burdening my child and setting up that expectation of what your child is going to do for you is
Mhm. Mhm.
realistic for
Mhm.
them and their circumstances.
Yeah. Very much so. And when you think about it too, is the whole family dynamic. If you're moving in with one daughter, let's say,
Mhm.
you've got other adult children that may feel like, well, that daughter's being favored, or there might be some scenarios, especially if you're putting in an investment into a living situation, that can you have to consider that piece as well.
Absolutely. And I do think multi-generational housing is oftentimes a very large financial investment.
Yeah.
It's and if I were to advise my clients that if you're going to move in with your child or children, for everyone to be the happiest possible, I would recommend, one of those granny pods in the backyard, or maybe a major remodel of their home so that the child and his or her family can have their own space. They have their own kitchen, they
Mhm.
have their own living space, they have their own bedrooms, they have their own bathrooms. And then the parent or parents, if it's two of them, who are then moving into that child's home, or vice versa, it doesn't matter which direction
Mhm.
it goes, the parents also maintain their completely separate living space.
Right.
It is so tough trying to share a kitchen day in and day out. Everybody wants
Mhm.
breakfast, everybody wants dinner, everyone, maybe I don't do my dishes every night, but mom does. And it's going to drive
Mhm.
mom crazy if she's going to try and cook and my kids have left their dirty dishes out on the counter. So if you're a parent and you are hoping to live with a child, if it's at all financially feasible, even if it
Yeah.
means using a significant amount of your life savings, I would recommend that you invest in
Yeah.
remodeling that home in order to allow
Yeah.
everyone to have their own space.
Well, and on top of that, we have to consider accessibility. Um,
Exactly.
if you as an independent person maybe not need a ramp, may not need a walker, you may not need certain, medical equipment that needs to incorporate, but you don't know what could be in the future. So it's like, for example, if doorways are only 29 inches wide in a lot of the older homes, wheelchairs do not fit through. So you're going to have to widen doorways. You're going to have to make sure that in a bathroom that you can get a wheelchair into the bathroom if that's an issue. Even with a walker, it can be difficult with a narrow doorway. I know that there's so many scenarios that have to happen in order for a senior to live comfortably. Not to mention, I mean, how many times people say, well, we'll just remodeled the basement. Okay, well, how will mom and dad get up the stairs to the main living space to see you? How are you going to get them in and out of the home if it's a split level house? There's all different types of considerations to think about. So it's not just so easy to say, oh, well, mom and dad could go live here. There's a lot of considerations over a long-term care plan. Maybe if there's a challenge with dementia or with different types of health challenges, you're looking at potentially, is this really worth spending hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially to remodel a piece of a home when, you may not see a proper ROI on that if it's not for the long term.
Right. And I think that gets back to the idea that communication is also an extremely important part of creating that multi-generational living plan. It's setting up that expectation. I think you had touched on one thing earlier in that it's not only communicating with the child that you're going to live with, but it might also be communicating with all the other interested parties. If
Yes.
mom and dad are thinking, I'm going to make a very large investment, I'm going to remodel my son or my daughter's home so that I can have a downstairs living area that is wheelchair accessible and that I can age in for the rest of my life. Well, then you have to have that conversation of if mom and dad die a few years later, that money has been invested into that child's house, and the other children aren't going to get the benefit of that. So those
Right.
parents need to make sure they've updated their estate plan, they've created a deed that allows that resource to then pass to the child with whom they're living. Or if
Right.
that's not what they want, they have to have that clear conversation and expectation with that child, but
Right.
also with other members of the family. Because you
Yes.
don't want to be in a circumstance where mom and dad die, something happens, they can no longer remain in that home, and people are fighting over the investment mom and dad made into living there.
Right.
And what's going to happen to that? There's so many
Yeah.
ways it can go wrong. That's extremely important for clients who are considering doing this. Sit down with an expert who has a lot of knowledge of multi-generational housing and issues that need to be addressed when making that decision.
Yeah. Well,
it's definitely not entered into easily.
Yes. So these are very, very important questions. And Andrea and we are going to be right back right after this. Did you know that you can discover hundreds of podcasts in our library on senior care? So visit our website and discover our decision guides that will help you also navigate decision making. Find us at answersforelders.com.